This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at wpln.org/support.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's December 30th, 2025, and on this day in 1853, preparations were underway for one of the most unusual New Year's Eve dinners of all time. It was held in London's Crystal Palace, inside the massive model of a dinosaur, an iguanodon, to be specific. This was super early in the whole thing of identifying and naming those prehistoric animals. In fact, the brand new exhibit that the model was part of was designed in part by Richard Owen, the guy who came up with the term dinosaur. It was an elaborate 8-course meal for about 24 people. Owen sat at the head of the table, the literal head of the table. What I'm saying is that his seat was tucked inside the skull. Thank goodness it was just a model. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your Daily Digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Tennessee was home to dinosaurs during the Cretaceous Period, but we're never going to find the wealth of fossils that turn up when folks dig in places like Montana, because when our area had dinos, the land was very swampy, and the ocean was much closer than it is now. It covered part of West Tennessee, in fact. The theory is that most of the bones from that era were washed away. That seems to be borne out by the condition of the only dinosaur remnants that have been found in the state, the Edmontonsaurus. Some people have nicknamed it the Great American Duck-billed Dinosaur. They were herbivores who lived on the kind of cypress trees that thrive in swampy conditions. And more telling, the bones found in Tennessee are coated in fossilized remains of small sea creatures, especially plankton. And that's just the tiny number of dinosaur bones found in the state. Digs have turned up far more evidence of smaller animals from the same time period. For example, during the dinosaur age, there were a lot of aquatic gastropods here. But truth be told, if you're interested in extinct creatures from a very different era, in Tennessee, the real excitement comes from the Ice Age. And the place to find those bones is the Gray Fossil Site. It's out in East Tennessee, in Washington County. About 25 years ago, a geologist with the State Department of Transportation was out at a site where crews were widening Highway 75, and he noticed that the clay they were digging through was really unusual. He called a halt to the work, and when he brought other experts out to take a look, they started finding bone fragments within minutes. Basically, the rock and soil formations are very unusual for the area. Those unusual features have qualities that are very good at preserving bones and fossils. Wow, what bones they are. Digs at the site have found ancient crocodiles, tortoises, and saber-toothed cats. They found tapirs and sloths, along with kinds of bears and pandas that just don't exist anymore. Prehistoric horses with extra toes. They've even found rhino bones. That's right, Tennessee used to be home to a species of rhinoceros. Oh, and a sort of elephant with extra flattened tusks that help them scoop plants from the bottom of shallow ponds. Some of the trees and plants found there are familiar to Southerners today, like live oaks, hickory trees, witch hazel, and sunflowers. But there's also evidence of species that are now only considered to be native to places like Southeast Asia. And of course, that's just what's been found at the Gray site. Finds turn up now and then all over the state, like the saber-toothed cat unearthed during the building of a downtown office structure that inspired the logo for the Nashville Predators. If you want to see ancient bones for yourself, the University of Tennessee's McClung Museum has hundreds of fossils in its collection. That's on the UT campus in Knoxville. And closer to home, there's a newer museum in Murfreesboro that grew out of MTSU, but is now independent, called the Earth Experience. It has relics, fossils, and mineral samples from around the world, and that does include some found here in Tennessee. The goal is to expand that current facility into a full-fledged natural history museum at some point in the future. In just a few minutes, a little bit of paperwork could make a big difference to safety in Tennessee. So why isn't that red tape required? That's coming up after the newscast.
At WPLN, we tell stories about honoring our families.
If he become a monk, that means that mom and dad will go to heaven when they pass away.
And preserving memories.
I never heard of a Rosenwald School. Nobody never told me that's where I went.
I'm Char Daston, and my reporting connects you with your neighbors and the important moments in their lives.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Cease and desist letters have gone out to dozens of online gaming sites. State Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti announced yesterday that his office successfully targeted operations for nearly 40 online sweepstakes casinos. The crackdown targets platforms that officials say use legal loopholes to look legitimate. The AG's office says these sites often market themselves as free-to-play games, allowing users to buy virtual currency that can be redeemed for cash prizes. In a statement, Skrmetti says, quote, "The only thing you can be sure about with an online sweepstakes casino is that it's going to take your money." The move is similar to other enforcement actions across the country. Some of the platforms include Chumba, High Five Casino, and Lucky Land. The death rate in Tennessee prisons has more than doubled over the past 2 decades, even though the number of people behind bars has stayed basically flat. Official statistics show a significant number of those deaths as having causes that could not be determined. The Tennessean reports another big increases in the category of accidental death. That includes drug overdoses. Suicide and homicide are also on the rise. Across the nation, prisons are more deadly than they used to be, but the mortality rate is climbing at a particularly fast pace in Tennessee. Experts say policies that increasingly limit inmates' access to the outside world or cut down on the chance of early release don't help. They say people who feel hopeless are more likely to seek out contraband drugs or decide there's no point in opting for good behavior. The Middle District of Tennessee has a new Trump-appointed U.S. attorney. Braden Busek was sworn in as chief federal prosecutor for the district on Christmas Eve. Prior to his appointment, Busek worked for the Southeastern Legal Foundation, a conservative nonprofit that has brought anti-transgender and anti-DEI lawsuits against schools. He also served as an assistant district attorney general in Williamson County and an assistant U.S. attorney in the Western District. Starting January 1st, a database of repeat domestic abusers will take effect. It's called Savannah's Law, named after Savannah Puckett. She was a sheriff's deputy in Middle Tennessee who was murdered by her then-boyfriend in 2022. Her family later discovered that the killer had multiple domestic violence charges, and they felt Savannah would still be alive if that information was known. Only those convicted of domestic violence more than once will be placed in the registry. While advocates say this is a step in the right direction, there are concerns over 2 technicalities of the law. 1, that many abusers do not always face criminal charges. And 2, a person can petition to get off the list after 5 years. Supporters say even if the law protects one life, it's worth it. Tennessee will receive $206 million to improve rural health care. The news comes from U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn, who announced the funding as part of a 5-year initiative to rebuild and modernize rural health care across the state. The senator says that non-urban residents often face long travel times to see specialists, and the new funding will reduce travel burdens. She says the investment could mean the difference between life and death for people in rural Tennessee. All 50 states will receive an award between $145 million and $280 million starting in 2026 and lasting until 2030. 2025 was a year full of deregulation. The federal government is slashing rules on fossil fuels, water, even the act of reporting pollution. In Tennessee, the state legislature has pursued similar initiatives. Lawmakers passed a bill this year to remove protections on much of the state's wetlands. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports.
More than 250 years ago, Europeans colonized Tennessee. Farms and houses began to spread across the land as they cleared forests, prairies, and swamps. Many of the state's wetlands disappeared from maps and memory. After the loss, state leaders realized their value, and 50 years ago, they set up wetland regulations. This year, the state reversed course. Representative Kevin Vaughn sponsored a bill to cut many of those protections.
There are resources that need to be protected, but I'll tell you what doesn't need to be protected.
Vaughn's also a developer. Some years ago, he was involved in a project the state fined for illegally draining a wetland. And now he and others could financially benefit from the law he championed. But communities could suffer losses. Grace Stranch is the head of the environmental nonprofit Harpeth Conservancy. She says wetlands are critical to healthy ecosystems. They act as extensions of rivers and creeks, filtering pollution and controlling the flow of water, even weakening the power of floods.
So this is a devastating blow that they no longer have that protection.
Developers have a choice. They can bulldoze right over wetlands, or they can build around them. And Stranch says home buyers can influence the market too.
People in Tennessee can decide where they want to buy their land and property, and developers can decide how they want to build and how they want to show up in the community.
The Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation set up a wetlands database this year. If people are buying a newly built home, they can check for historic wetlands, kind of like using Google Street View to see if a property had trees before construction. And if an area starts to see unusual flooding, folks can look at developments nearby and see, did there used to be wetlands there? Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
It's no secret that 2025 has been a hard year for alcohol producers. Sales are down and production is scaling back. But Kentucky Public Radio's Justin Hicks reports there is one bright spot in earnings reports. Sales of whiskey have been growing in so-called emerging markets.
Polls say Americans, especially younger ones, are drinking less. Then there's an ongoing Canadian and United Kingdom boycott on American spirits. That's in retaliation for President Trump's tariffs. And for Louisville-based Brown-Forman, that means hard times. But in the country of Turkey, whiskey is booming. Berkay Adalig is a whiskey promoter based out of Istanbul. He says young people are flocking to brands like Jack Daniel's as an affordable alternative to the country's national drink, Raka.
So nowadays, especially young people don't see the value in giving $40, $50 to a bottle which will be finished in 1 hour.
Brown-Forman did not reply to a request for comment. I'm Justin Hicks in Louisville.
The number of Tennesseans going to the doctor for flu-like illnesses is up, way up. The rate jumped almost twice as much, from 3.7 to 6.5% in the latest state data. In recent winters, those rates often peaked above 10%. The state's southeast region, surrounding Chattanooga, is already there. Meanwhile, Nashville's rate of doctor's visits for flu-like illness was just over 5%. The Tennessee Health Department says it's not too late to get vaccinated. Common symptoms include fever and feeling tired. The state health commissioner says the shot should protect you against severe disease and death. Pregnant women, infants, older adults, and people with certain medical conditions are at high risk. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Judges in some Tennessee counties are now demanding greater transparency from people who've been court-ordered to give up their guns, following reporting from WPLN and ProPublica. Criminal justice reporter Paige Flager says the reform is spreading, despite inaction from lawmakers and a state council to require the change for all of Tennessee.
All rise. Domestic Violence Court is now in session. Honorable Scarlett Ellis presiding.
When I visited Scott County's domestic violence court last year, I watched as the judge had a conversation with a man about his guns.
Do you own any firearms? Are there any firearms that's been registered to you that someone else is holding for you?
He was supposed to give up his guns and had to fill out a form, a firearms dispossession affidavit. But Scott County's document has something extra. It asks for the name and the address of the person who's receiving the guns. The standard form for the rest of the state doesn't require that.
The form is really incomplete.
Becky Bullard is with Nashville's Office of Family Safety.
We can't have someone dispossess of their firearm lawfully if we don't know who they're giving the gun to.
Republican lawmakers introduced a bill to change the state form after our reporting. But there was opposition from the NRA, and it didn't make it into law. Then, more recently, a state council failed to bring the matter to a vote. In the meantime, some judges are taking matters into their own hands.
When I heard about what Scott County was doing, I was shocked.
Shelby County Judge Greg Gilbert is one of at least 10 judges in counties around Tennessee that are requiring this extra transparency.
It does make it a little more likely that people will take this seriously.
It's a small change that could have a big impact, Bullard says.
We really do not have a minute to lose, and this is a battle that we have been fighting around a form for years, and it could affect someone in the next minute.
Our investigations have found that roughly 1 in 4 shooting victims in domestic violence homicides were killed by someone who never should have had access to a gun. Paige Flager, WPLN News.
Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.